Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this wonderful adult education session. Sarah Reynolds isn't here today, but I want to give her due credit. She invited our wonderful speaker and asked me to introduce him, which I'm delighted to do. And this is LJ Milone. And LJ is currently the spiritual director, the director of spiritual formation, we should say, at St. Matthew the Apostle Cathedral, Catholic Cathedral in Washington, D.C. But his experience is vast. He's a spiritual teacher, he's a retreat leader, he is a spiritual director, and he's a student of the mystics, which is something that's always really interested me. And he holds a Doctor of Ministry degree in preaching from the Aquinas Institute of Theology and a master's degree in pastoral studies from the Washington Theological Union. He is the author of Nothing But God, The Everyday Mysticism of Meister Eckhart. Anyone here a fan of Meister Eckhart? Yes. Okay, very good. And he's practiced silent meditations over 20 years and has attempted to live in the holy mystery of God with 4 children at home. So I can relate to that. So LJ is going to speak to us today, offer us a session on Christian contemplation, and then we'll do a facilitated meditation followed by a Q&A. He grew up in New York City and lives in Columbia, Maryland. We're really glad to welcome you today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. I'm LJ. And like she said, I'm from New York and a student of the mystics. I remember growing up in New York, my major question was, first, how do I get out of here? And then second, how do I become holy? That was my major question. As soon as I was in 8th grade, and for some reason I became aware of death, and it wasn't a bad awareness, it was just, I know this life is not all there is. And I just happened to be in religion class, and it kind of gave me some initial answers. And instead of closing down the question and just giving me a soft answer, it prompted deeper and further questions. I think that's most important as you start to learn about silent meditation today. It's not about closure. It's not about pat answers. It's about openness to mystery. And it's going to not necessarily feel peaceful. For a lot of people it does, but sometimes you might get exposed to your mind and it'll feel very busy and it'll feel very active. That's all very normal. The mystics assure us of that. But this is rooted, as I found, in Matthew 6:6, which is right in the heart of the Sermon on the Mount, the teaching Jesus gives on prayer right before he gives the Lord's Prayer, right? When you pray, go to your inner room, close the door, and pray to your Abba in secret. They didn't have private rooms in those days, so I'd like to imagine what my life would have been like if I was in 1st century Palestine and, I was living with my 4 children and their mom in one room. I probably wouldn't have any hair left. But that's how they lived. They all lived in one big room. Big. They all lived in one small room. So when the audience Jesus is talking to hears him, they're not thinking, let me go into a literal private space. They are thinking the only privacy they have is within. So when you pray, go to your inner space, close the door. So it's kind of stay with that image of a room, right? You close the door on active thinking. So here's a big distinction I'm going to make for you today, because when we go into silent meditation, you cannot obliterate your thoughts. You're going to have thoughts. Thoughts. You're going to hear things outside. You're going to have your grocery list probably go through your mind, especially once I say it out loud like this. You're going to have lots of plans you have for the week, or maybe memories you had from this weekend or this morning or yesterday. Deeper memories sometimes may come up. You'll have lots of thoughts come through your mind. What Jesus is talking about here, what the mystics are talking about, is we stop actively thinking about our thoughts. Stop actively thinking about them. Stop engaging them. Okay? So close the door. Pray to your Abba in secret. I always like Abba a little bit better than Father. Father is so formal in English, and Abba sounds so familiar, right? God is the presumption of Jesus and the mystics. God is not only close, but within us. and even one with us. Before we've ever done anything, before we've ever sinned or been selfish, God is always and forever one with us. So we access this God who is one with us, this God who is mystery. That's a big one, mystery. This God who is forever beyond our thoughts and feelings. We access that God by turning off active thinking and resting in faith. That is the classic expression going back to St. Gregory the Great in the, oh my goodness, 600s, 6th century, somewhere around there, right? Thank you. Rest is the classic expression. And just think of that for a second, to switch metaphors from a private space to sleep. Do you ever try to go to sleep? I have. Trust me, I tried many times. Tried to put others to sleep, namely my 4-year-old twins. It doesn't always work. But when you let it happen, right, you set up kind of the conditions for it to happen, and you stop resisting, it happens. It's a good metaphor to describe what's going on in silent Christian meditation. It's not about me and my efforts. And that's a big, maybe, distinction between Christian meditation and maybe other forms. It's really not about my efforts, and it's not about concentration. This is a big one. A lot of people do get tripped up on it, but this is such a forgiving way of praying. It's okay. I was focused on concentration for a while when I started this. It's not about focusing your attention, but just being present. So it's much more open and relaxed. Concentration requires effort, requires my, engagement of my thought, really, and a focusing on a point. And that's not this at all. This is, again, a third metaphor. It's like a mirror. Think of a mirror, okay? The mirror reflects whatever is put in front of it. If you are putting a pot of beautiful flowers in front of the mirror, it's going to reflect the flowers. If you put a pile of garbage, it's going to reflect the pile of garbage. If you put a person smiling, reflects the person smiling. A person frowning, it's going to reflect the person frowning. And yet, once the person leaves, once the flowers leave, it's gone. It's gone. That's your consciousness. You have thoughts and feelings. I don't have to convince you of that, right? And then they go. Are you preoccupied this morning with what you were preoccupied with yesterday morning? Maybe, but maybe it feels a little different than it did yesterday morning, if you are. Normally, for most people, it just kind of keeps moving. The thoughts and the feelings keep moving. Nothing remains. Everything passes. Everything. Everything in our mental world passes. Our mental emotional world, our psychological space, it all passes through us. So we are simply stepping back and letting that happen and not getting caught up in the cinema of our thoughts and feelings, right? Because they're usually dramas, right? A big one, a very big one. Ooh. I don't know if have you already chosen what you want to give up for Lent? If you haven't, this would be a good one. And I'll try and commit to this as well. Complaining, right? Oh my goodness. I could complain about how much I complain. Complaining is a little story I tell myself about why I'm right. And, objectively, there may be situations when I was, but it's a story I tell myself, and it kind of stirs up feelings, it stirs up judgments, it stirs up egocentricity, right? So we're going to not engage. So if you have a complainy thought, just let it be. If you have a memory, let it be. If you have, typically, when I lead sessions like this with people, there's always some commotion somewhere in the building, and it's light. But like I was at a church in Tennessee a few weeks ago, and someone was right on the hallway talking while we were praying in silence. It's a very hard thing to not pay attention to. All I can say is, let it be. We let go of our thinking by letting be. Not by pushing out, not by pushing out. You just kind of lay down your defenses. That's what we're doing here. So to help you, the tradition, especially found in The Cloud of Unknowing, which is a 14th century mystical treatise, but it goes back to not just the desert fathers and mothers in the 4th century, but also Jesus himself in the desert. He quotes scripture, right, in the desert. So the idea is to take a word or a phrase, but a short phrase. Maybe the cloud recommends 1 or 2 syllables. You can extend that 3 or 4 if you want to. But a short word that captures your love for and faith in God. So something, peace, something like love. You might want to steer clear of theologically heavy words. So if that church in Tennessee, one woman chose Jesus, but then she started thinking about Jesus. I might recommend, if that's going to happen to you, don't choose the word Jesus, but you could choose Jesus in another language. So this has been my word for the past almost 20 years. Yeshua. Yeshua. Jesus in Aramaic. Notice how much softer that is. You can almost, when you say Jesus in English, it's like a televangelist kind of Jesus, it's kind of ringing in your ears there. But if you say Yeshua, that almost automatically quiets you a little bit, at least for us, right? So choose a word right now, close your eyes, take a moment, ask the Holy Spirit for a word of 1 or 2, 3 or 4 syllables. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Okay. Looks like most everybody has a word. If you don't have one, I simply suggest peace. Peace. So in just a few moments, we're going to go into silent meditation. I'm giving you kind of the crash course here, but it's fine. It really doesn't take a whole lot. It's not complicated in terms of a method, okay? We'll be in silence for 20 minutes, but here is your general practice, okay? Whenever you start to think about anything, actively think about anything at all, even Jesus, even God, ever so gently. And I want to gently underline gently, gently repeat that word in your mind. So come back to that word. You may find you need to come back to that word every, not just second, but every half a second. That's fine. Because when you come back to the word, you are affirming your love for God, your faith in God, you're choosing God over yourself. It's what the mystics would call the most intimate self-denial, letting go of what I want to think about to simply be present to God, okay? So you may find you need to say it often. That's fine. You may find you don't need to say it much at all. That's fine too. So the point is not to repeatedly say it. That is what's one method. That's not the method I'm sharing this morning. This is maybe the more direct method. It's the more pure silence method. Trying to acclimate you to pure silence very quickly. So whenever you think of anything, when you start engaging your thoughts, return ever so gently to your sacred word, okay? And that's all you do. If the heavens open and you see Jesus and you see God the Father and you see the Holy Spirit coming to you in the form of a dove, return to your word. If you fall asleep, one time I did this is back in college, I did this with a bunch of college kids, and there was like 40 or 50 of us, and one of them had her chair against the wall, and we started meditating, and she fell right asleep, and everybody knew she fell asleep because she snored so loud. And it's fine. If you fall asleep, and you may, first of all, please help yourself and get some more sleep. But that's fine. You know what you do? The same thing you do if you see a vision of God. When you wake up, ever so gently, return to your word. If you think you're trying too hard, ever so gently, return to your word. You think nothing's happening, you're getting frustrated, ever so gently, return to your word. So this is maybe the fundamental theme of Lent, right? Repentance. Keep coming back. Keep returning to God, but we don't know who or what God is. God is forever beyond our minds. So we are returning to God's essential mystery. We're not putting any labels on God. We're not even calling God God. We're letting God be who God is for us. So that's why it requires what the mystics call naked faith. I think this is what the faith is really, what Jesus is really talking about in terms of faith in the Gospels, just naked trust in God. Not in a doctrine, not in a belief, just God, okay? So I'm not going to take any questions now. I want you to experience it first. So we're going to be in silence. Sarah told me, go right ahead. So we're going to be in silence for 20 minutes, okay? I'm going to time us. But I'm going to give you a small out, okay? If you're getting restless, that's fine. You can shift around if you need to, certainly. And by the way, I have to say this at most groups. If you need to make a noise, make a noise. If you need to sneeze or cough, that's fine. So let's give each other that permission. Just make your noise, okay? Clear your throat. I'm a throat clearer. You're going to probably hear me do that. If you need to use the bathroom, just please go. You're not trapped here. Go use the bathroom. That's fine. Cell phone, thank you. I always forget that. Thank you very much. If you could, please put your cell phone on silence. Thank you very much. That's one I can never remember that for the life of me. I don't know why. So that would be good. Yes. So like I said about sleep, we're just setting up the conditions. The best conditions simply to be in God's presence. That's all. We're not doing anything. We are just being in God's presence. And then you take up that word. Again, if you don't have a word, use the word peace. You take up that word to help maintain our presence, to just keep coming back to that word whenever you start to think about anything at all. One final piece of teaching. Resist no thought. Retain no thought. React to no thought. But you will. You will resist. You will retain. You will react. And it's okay. This is so forgiving a prayer. It's okay. You're primed to do that. So when you do resist your thoughts or try and hold on to them or react to them emotionally, all you do is ever so gently return without judgment. That may be the hardest part for most of us, to not judge ourselves for getting caught in thinking or getting caught in maybe a judgy thought or a complaining thought, but just cutting off that commentary and coming back to the silence. Okay? Couldn't be simpler, couldn't be harder to a degree, right? So I'm going to lead you in with a short guided opening prayer, kind of reminds you of the basic points, and then I'll cut it off and 20 minutes of silence. I time us, so don't worry. You may, I'm aware of my phone. You may hear my phone's alarm go off. It's a little loud, but I'm going to try and cut it off ahead of time just to prepare you. But when it's time to stop, I'm going to start praying the Lord's Prayer out loud, and just listen, okay? Because I'm going to say it slowly. And then I'll take your comments and questions, okay? All right, so I invite you to sit back and close your eyes. And I should say it does help to, for most people, to put their feet on the floor and their hands in their lap. But sit as you feel comfortable, okay? And a big point is not to keep your back so rigid that it's uncomfortable, and not to be so comfortable that you will fall asleep. So there's kind of a sweet spot between rigidity and relaxation, alertness, just an alert posture, okay? If you have to shift around, again, fine, cough fine, sneeze fine, need to get up and go, that's fine too, Okay? I am not the meditation police. All right? Okay, so sit back, close your eyes, take a big, deep breath. And rest. Rest from thinking. To rest in God. Don't make the silence happen. Don't force it. Be gentle. Be at ease with whatever happens during your meditation. Let all the noises just be. Everything passes. Just be present. But when engaged with your thoughts, return ever so gently to your sacred word. And otherwise, simply remain open to God's holy mystery. Just be. Just silence. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Right. So once again, take a big deep breath and take a stretch if you have to. Okay, so comments, questions. What was that like for you? Have any questions about the method? By the way, this method is called centering prayer, and we have groups all over the capital region. It's very popular actually in the Episcopal Church and the Catholic Church, but they're in every church pretty much. Every type of church, not that every single church has a group. So, comments or questions? Anyone? Yes.
So this feels very much like secular meditation that I've also done, and I'm wondering if you could reflect a little bit on the Christian dimension of approaches like this and how to incorporate a Christian
Sure,
dimension.
sure. So I did a little study with, oh gosh, what was his name? He taught at Loyola College up near Baltimore. He was in the pastoral counseling department. He did a study of people who do meditation and who do secular and Christian forms of meditation. And he found that it was actually more effective in a Christian context or in a believing context. So first, it's just the context, right? You're already Christians. You're already going to church. You're trying to live the teachings of Jesus. This is kind of one of those pillars, one of those missing pieces. And of course, the big difference is faith. Why you're doing this. The mystics are simply people who pray. So I think you're all called to be mystics, okay? And people who pray, mystics, run on desire. They want God. Secular meditation might be more about self-help or simple relaxation. So it might feel like a similar psychological experience, but for us, it's not about the psychological experience. It's about faith. That's the big difference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hope that helps. It's the intention. Yes. Yes. Just real quick. The difference is intention. Thank you. Excellent point. Go ahead.
Yes, I felt very supported by being in a group.
Yes.
Even though in a way, I was not explicitly aware of the group, but yet I was very much so. And so I wonder, I don't know about, if I were alone, what it would be like. And I wonder if you'd speak to that.
Yeah, you are reiterating something we've heard lots and lots of times. I feel it too. When I am in a group, it feels like the silence is deeper because we're all kind of gathered around the same presence. And there is something, if you read Ilia Delio, we were just talking earlier, she remarks that quantum physics is saying there is something about how consciousness is shared to an extent. So when we gather together, and especially doing something very consciousness raising, something happens. So all I can say is, yes, that is very true. And when you do it alone, it feels harder. But also you automatically, when you're in a group, you have that support when you go into the silence, right? So it feels a little easier to do it. There's an accountability maybe, even if it's just, I don't want to be the one to get up and go, you know. It's harder to do it on your own. Yeah. But it's still, you can still actually reach deeper levels of peace. But again, it's a really big difference. It's not about feelings at all. It's really not about your experience. Another big difference from secular meditation. It's simply about God. Yeah. Thank you. Great point. Yes, ma'am. The back.
My challenge was not so much thoughts and feelings per se, but I kept having a particular piece of music come in, and it would, maybe start softly and then I'd realize it was there,
Yeah,
try to push it away. But that was my challenge the whole time.
sure.
Was this one piece of music?
Yeah, that was coming into your head. Not the, I think we heard singing at one point here, and not that it was, yeah, it's going to be different for everybody. It'll be, I'd like to tell people when I was dating my kid's mom, she lived in Baltimore and there was the big Maryland State Lotto sign. So every time just because I would see it so often, every time I sat down to meditate, all I wanted to do was think about, what if I won the lottery? Oh man, of course I'd make a meditation center. Meanwhile, I'm not meditating. So you're going to have, it's going to be unique to you, the kind of recurring thought, and thought here is an umbrella term for any perception. So it can be a memory of a tune. Sometimes for people, it's color. It can be any number of things. And the advice is the same. Don't resist, don't retain, don't react. But when you do, return. So in other words, let it be. It's kind of like when you go to the supermarket and they're playing music in the background. You don't really pay attention to it, but sometimes you go, oh, there's a song going on, right? But then you just go about your shopping, right? Just let it be. It's background noise, kind of. And it's almost always gonna be there. Some thought, some feeling. It's almost always gonna be there. The times when it's not there, you're not gonna be aware. That's the weird thing. There have been times when people have done this, myself included. Where did I just go then? It's a little moment of pure awareness. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
great.
there's in the chat, so I can tell you what it said in the chat.
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, Carol Bartholomew asks, how do you think about breath?
How do you think about breath? So, breath can be in place of a word, it can be what brings you back to the silence. And in that case, you don't necessarily need to breathe in any particular way. You just have your awareness brush up against your breathing. So in other words, you simply become aware of your breathing in place of returning to a word. Yeah. Yeah, there's no special breathing technique. In fact, that's a really excellent way to bring yourself back because it's so non-conceptual. Yeah, please.
Thank you for this. Just going to your point about we come to this as Christians because of our intent,
Mhm.
and that defines it. And yet, when we're meditating, even if we're thinking about God or something we've learned in the sermon, you want us to come back to nothing. I find that a juxtaposition.
Yes.
Can
Why do
you
we
unpack
have to?
that?
Sure. Why do we have to come back to nothing? Do you know that the mystics, thank you for saying that word, the mystics call God nothing. Not because God's not real, because God's not a thing, right? Even thinking about God, right, is still a thought. It's not who God really is. So here again, where it's all about God's mystery, letting God be God. That's what's happening in the silence, right? That's what's going on. We're just opening to God's holy, transcendent, meaning above and beyond this world, space and time, my very experience, my very mind, existence itself. God made all of it, right? So it's kind of letting God, you might think of it this way, it's letting God introduce God's self to us. And the mystics will say God's language is silence. And everything else is a bad translation. So it's not that God doesn't speak to us, right, in our language. That's what Jesus is. Jesus is God speaking to us in our terms, but it's almost like Jesus is extending a hand and bringing us, come learn God's ways on God's terms. Faith and silence. Okay? Does that help? Good. Thank you. Great questions. Yeah. Anybody else online or here? Yes, ma'am. 24 years this month,
Oh,
even though I look
sorry.
like I'm 12.
So what would you say is the greatest benefit in your life to this sort of continued meditation?
Oh, good question. I would make a distinction between joy and happiness. Happiness is like this feeling, right, of elation, but joy, because I don't always feel happy, certainly not, but there is this kind of ground upon which I walk that I would call joy, where this fundamental, everything's going to be okay. Everything is good. Even though I feel like it's not good in the moment, everything is good. It's, if you know Julian of Norwich, we think part of my family traces its lineage back to Norwich, England. So I like to think I'm like her great nephew. But she says all is well, all shall be well, right? There's a sense of that, and that brings peace and this ability to just let go. And it's not judgmental. You don't think, why is everybody getting so upset about this? They're so stupid. No, it's, you just don't invest your time in what is passing away. Or you could enjoy something and then let it go, just like the mirror, right? I can enjoy a good cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee. It's one of my favorites. But when it's over, it's over. And it doesn't linger, in other words. Now, this is all relative. This isn't absolute. It's not like I'm absolutely there. I still waver back and forth between that and my ego, But that's more letting go, more peace, more patience. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. The timing, yes. Before they had watches, they just prayed and prayed and prayed. They sometimes 20 minutes, sure. We found, this is through experience with all kinds of meditation. For Western people, we found that it takes at least 15 minutes for us to calm down. And then an extra 5 minutes just to kind of round it out, I think. That's kind of standard if you go across not just Christian, but a lot of different types of meditation. It takes us about 20 minutes to get into it. Different methods will recommend different amounts of time you do it. So centering prayer will say do it twice a day, every day. John Main, Christian Meditation Group, World Community for Christian Meditation will say the same thing, 20 minutes twice a day. That's kind of a baseline to go forward. And they'll say, really, the intention is to increase it. But the intention isn't to always be meditating in a holy place, but to eventually take the mind that is changed from meditation into daily life, so that you can come back to the silence when you're at the grocery store, or when you're with your family, or when it's, Thanksgiving dinner and Uncle Frank is saying that thing again. It's like, all right, come back to the silence. Whatever your daily life is like, that you can come back to it and access this presence. This is another way to think of this, by the way, just presence. Access this presence in daily life. Yeah. Any other comments? One more? Okay. Anybody else? One more question or comment? Oh, there's a few more online, looks like. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I'm happy to stick around for a minute if you want to talk. But I'm so glad to have shared this with you, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the invite. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.